Boker Tov Chaverim, I'm Steve Ben-Nun. You're watching Israeli News Live, and of course, the results are pretty much already in at this point now. Sean Hannity also, along with many other news media folks, just coming out a couple of hours ago and now declaring that Prime Minister Netanyahu will remain as Prime Minister in Israel for yet another term. But of course, it's not without a shroud of controversy already. And I guess we can go all the way back to the Obama administration when he sent people to Israel, as some believe was to try to unseat the prime minister at that time. We have contended that it was actually to make sure he stayed in power as they move forward, not a two-state solution so much as a new world order. And this is one reason why the prime minister is, I think, staying in power in Israel. But it doesn't come without a bunch of irregularities that already have been reported. In fact, the Likud party themselves, reported by the Jerusalem Post, no less, hired 1,200 activists with hidden cameras to monitor the election fraud, as they called it. The very fact of bringing in monitors with cameras into the polling station on voting day in the state of Israel is absolutely illegal to do. And it only suggests that if the Likud party was willing to hire in these monitors, 1,200 of them, putting in secret cameras, and oddly enough, only in the Arabic polling stations, makes you wonder what really may have went on besides that. Of course, we'll never know. That is something that will be kept very secretive from the entire globe, the world. No one will never know. But it also kind of begs to, I begin to think as I look at the situation that's happening, I'm reminded of Naftali Bennett, who, by the way, did not keep his seat in the polls there. But he said that before the election even got here, that he believed that Netanyahu would remain in power and that Benny Gantz would be brought into the coalition itself. The very man running against Netanyahu would actually be brought into the coalition. We played a clip of that for you guys about a week or so ago. And I kind of could not help but notice that. Benny Gantz, the former Israeli general, who seems to be more of a leftist there, but he's going to actually be brought in as part of the coalition. Now, they haven't announced this as of yet, but supposed to be part of Trump's peace initiative that they're bringing about for this alleged two-state solution. And I have to tell you, from the very outset, we've known that there's already been a deal for two states long ago that has never been made public, that the Vatican negotiated with the Israeli government going back all the way to Shimon Peres in 1994. But we're still waiting to see how that's planning on playing out, because you got to remember this is still part of a new world order. Something they've been working on for many, many years is to bring about this new world order, and Jerusalem, of course, is going to be its capital. And a lot of the elite plans of Jared Kushner's peace plan happen to deal with East Jerusalem becoming part of a capital, so to speak, for the Palestinians. But in one regard, they may not call it a two-state solution, but give sovereignty there. And according to the latest leak in this documentation, is that the Palestinians would become Jordanian citizens, and it may be why they want a East Jerusalem still yet, for the Jordanians to basically have a capital for a Palestinian government that would be in East Jerusalem. And of course, the Gaza residents would become Egyptian citizens. I know it falls far short, as many have pressed, even in the protests that have been going on in Gaza for the right of return. But I think it might be far better than being just refugees living on a prison camp for the last however many years that this has been happening thus far. So we'll have to wait and see how this plays out. I'm not really sure as of yet which direction this is going to go into. But as again, and I'll tell you something, as I looked at this situation of this voter irregularities is what I call it. They're calling it fraud, monitor election fraud. I could not help but think of when Satan took Yeshua, took him up and showed him all the kingdoms of the world that ever were, or that were at that time. And he said, these are all mine, and I'll give them to you if you just bow down and worship me. Now, Yeshua never would, that is Jesus for those that don't know the name Yeshua, but Yeshua never would bow down to Satan. He refused to bow down. But you know what I find interesting? As I thought of this morning, it made me realize that many Christians around the world are bowing down to Satan today in order to be able to be sure that a certain outcome comes in the polls. Totally forgetting that Satan already, as he said to Yeshua, to Jesus himself, he says to him, all these kingdoms are mine, and I do with them whatsoever I want to do. And I'll give them to you if you just bow down to me here. Pay a little respect, the devil wanted. Well, isn't it fascinating? Yet we know this, and we know that Yeshua never would do it. Why? Because he knew that this was his right. It is what he is heir to, because a kingdom cannot be a kingdom without the people, the domain, and he knew that he was going to give his life for those people because he had another kingdom in another world where they would be a part of. But oddly enough today, so many believers totally forget about what happened in that hour of temptation. 40 days Yeshua spent in that temptation. And here we are on this earth today. The hour of temptation is there. And people, instead of believing in the very God of heaven, Yeshua, instead of believing on him and knowing that he says that where I am, I'll prepare a place that where I am, you may be also. The kingdom is within you, he said. That's when the life of Christ comes within you, then the kingdom of God is within you. Instead of being so caught up in Satan's kingdom, Satan's world, a new world order, an antichrist beast system, people are, and especially Christians, they are bowing down. They want to bow down to the Satan kingdom of this world and say, we shall serve you. No wonder why the Antichrist system will be established right there in Jerusalem. And yet everybody's so excited. Well, President Trump has declared Jerusalem the capital. Yeah, he fell short of East Jerusalem, though, and the Temple Mount, though, didn't he? How long will you bow down? You know, and what's funny, the secular community, 9 times out of 10, they refuse to bow down. Isn't it interesting? Because, you know, Yeshua, he lined himself. This is what they condemned him of. They said, you eat with the sinners and the publicans and all these outcasts of the world. You wouldn't come with the religious class. Well, it seems like a lot of times what people call the outcasts today have more of a humanitarian heart than the ones that claim to be the most religious of them all. The religious groups are all about being a cheerleader for war and destruction and kill all the people of Iran and kill all the people in Syria and wipe out the Palestinians and throw them out of the land. Isn't it? That's a far difference between that and what Yeshua and his values were. As he was down by the Galilee, and the people in Syria heard of the fame of him, and they all came to Israel. There were no Jews throwing them out, killing the Syrians as they came in, and Jesus healed every one of them. The Syrians. I think Jesus knew a little bit about them being the children of the matriarchs of Israel. But it just came to me this morning as I was thinking on that. What happened with Yeshua? He refused to bow down. And then I think to myself, Christians bow down every day. People that are supposed to have Yeshua as their example, yet they're bowing down. Bowing down to this world. And the very governmental systems that claim to be backed, like Trump has got all the evangelicals, even as they had their private meeting there the media that banned all the other secular news. They didn't want them to be there because, after all, this is really about Jared Kushner's two-state solution. And can we get the Christians to accept it? And will you make sure that the evangelicals stay on board with what we're doing? Because we need them to bow. We need them to bow down to what we're going to do. Wake up before it's too late. There's time for repentance. Anyway, listen, we're going to be live here in just a little while, about 45 minutes, on Adam Green has invited us on his program. I think we're going to be discussing the Noahide laws there. You might want to check that out. I think it'll be a very interesting meeting. I know that Miko Peled was a bombshell for many yesterday, but let me tell you something. Miko Peled is an Israeli-born Jewish man. His father was an Israeli general. By the way, my wife was telling me, I did not know this, I was curious. I asked her, I said, what about his father? You know, how did this ever affect his family? I think his father since passed away. She said, but his own father had woke up to the evils that were being done to the Palestinians and also became a very strong advocate for the Palestinians. This is the true spirit of Christ. Even if they don't believe Yeshua to be the Messiah, it's still the true. This is what Abraham was. All right, let's go back to Abraham. Abraham, when he went through the land, he wasn't going around knocking people off. In fact, there was so much respect to the Arabic community with Abraham that when he needed a burial place for his wife in Hebron, they said, we will give it to you. What is it to us? We want to give this to you. They wanted to give Abraham, but Abraham said, no, let me buy it. That's the true spirit of the Israelite. The return that was happening under the Ottoman Empire, that was the right way to return. This was the prophecy being fulfilled, that we would return to our homeland in the latter days. And the Jewish people of the Arabic nations were returning and they were purchasing the land. That was the right way. Not like the Ashkenazis that come in from Europe and just decide to kill everybody in the process. How do you think Yeshua would have done this? And you can't use Joshua, because you have to remember, when Joshua was coming up and Moses was coming up, what did God say to Moses to tell Joshua? Leave Esau alone and leave Ishmael and his people alone. Because why? They had defeated the Zamzamim and all the other different giants. They had purged their part of the land of this demonic Nephilim influence and had come into the land once again by these different nations. Now, when Abraham went through there, they didn't have that problem. But many years later, they had got into that witchcraft, and they had learned how to bring in this demonic Nephilim children once again from the fallen angels. This is why God sent Joshua in there and Caleb in order to purge out that portion of the land where they had done that. They weren't going in there attacking Ishmael's children. They weren't even attacking Esau's children for that matter. Think about it. Think of the difference as things have gone on. Jeez, it just really bothers me. Anyway, a couple other key things. Oh, by the way, too, I need to get a new editor. The editor I have is getting up in years, and I really love her very dearly. She's always remained anonymous, and there's very important reasons for that, but especially because of some of the content I'm writing. We just finished a portion for a book for another author. It's 15 pages. I need a very good editor. I am dyslexic, keep that in mind. So if you would like to help us out on that. In the book I'm writing, I can pay for an editor for that, but I'm just kind of looking for someone that could volunteer for this 15-page document that could help us out on that. Please send me a message. You could even leave it in the comment section here, how to get in touch with you, or private message you somewhere or something like that. We would really appreciate that greatly. Anyway, a couple other things real quick I got to hit because we got to get ready for Alan Green on his program there. Russian insider makes Israel great again. U.S. is laying groundwork for war with Iran. And yeah, that's definitely coming. So some people ask, what do we have to look forward to with Netanyahu? Netanyahu is going to get President Trump, while he's still in power as well, to annex not the West Bank per se, but the settlements in there that they want to keep. That's because once this deal comes out, there are going to be some settlements that are going to be uprooted. But he's going to want to have the ones that are not uprooted to be annexed and be part of Israel. That's probably the peace deal at any rate. But you got to keep in mind, a lot of politicians, including Jared Kushner, Donald Trump, they have, I don't know about Donald Trump per se, but like John Kerry, they have a lot of investment in the West Bank. There's something they know that we don't know, and I think it has a lot to do with the New World Order. All right, and then also I had brought up the United Nations, let's listen in real quick because we got the Vice President speaking live right now.
And strength.
This is on Venezuela.
Because they're marching to freedom. And in the words of Simón Bolivar, a people that loves freedom will in the end be free. But now is time for the United Nations to act and for the world to stand with the people of Venezuela as they march to freedom. History has taught us what happens when the civilized nations of the world allow oppression to go unchecked. When a brutal dictatorship arose in Europe, the world failed to respond.
I guess we could say that about the United States because that's what we have become, a dictator around the world, an imperialistic power, just toppling nations. I saw a report the other day, I think it was 60 nations, democratic nations, maybe not all of them democratic, that the U.S. has toppled, overthrown since we've been a nation. 60 of them. We have attempted the assassination of, I think, some 30 different people as well. Or 50, I think maybe it was 50, I forget the number, but anyway, it was really an alarming number. Anyway, the reason I was bringing this up, and I was actually hoping to catch it earlier, if you look at the United Nations scene, maybe I can pull up a picture of this real quick, United Nations, I was sitting there looking at this, the way they set up the United Nations and how the seating is there. And let me just pull up, see if I can get the right image for this. Oh, no, I'm sorry, not the United Nations. United Nations Security Council, I think is what they call it. Where this meeting is being held at right now. Yeah, here we go, right here. And it's that little, that horseshoe look to it. And as I was looking at that, the first thing that come to my mind was the Sanhedrin Council. You know, the Sanhedrin is wanting to replace anyway the United Nations and the United Nations Security Council. And so, whoops, sorry about that. Here we go, right there. There they are in that horseshoe type of circle. And of course, they've already set up the Sanhedrin underground, of course, inside of Israel. And again, it is that semicircle, and it looks so much like the United Nations Security Council. It's just really weird. Anyway, I just thought I'd throw that in there. Anyway, we got to get going, guys. Thank you. Thank you for watching. I'm Steve Ben-Nun with Israeli News Live. Shalom, shalom. In a world of Ein Shalom, there is no peace.